I've been CEO at the Volunteer Center now for exactly 2 years. So a lot of what I'm going to describe for you, I can't take any credit for. It's really sort of baked into our organization. But what I've become more and more impressed with is the ways in which we utilize volunteers to really extend the capacity of the work that we do. And I want to get you thinking along those lines. And we'll do some interactive sharing as well. So the Volunteer Center is 51 years old this year. And our mission is to turn people's caring into meaningful action. So we are trying to harness the power of volunteers to meet community needs. We run 2 mentoring programs, one for kids and one for moms whose kids are at risk. We run the chore service in our county. So we have volunteers installing grab bars and banisters and other kinds of things for senior citizens and the disabled. And then we run some civic leadership programs, as well as maintaining a database for other nonprofit organizations to list their volunteer opportunities. So with a staff of 15 people, my organization routinely is able each and every year to touch the lives of over 7,000 people in the county. And we do that because we're using volunteers to do so much of our work out and about in the community. And so in some ways, our volunteers, I sometimes think of them almost like professional volunteers. My chore volunteers have a regular schedule. There's the Monday crew van 1 and the Monday crew van 2. And every Monday, they're there so that my staff can schedule appointments for them because they know those volunteers are going to be there week in and week out. Our mentors are highly trained. They meet one-on-one with the kids or the families that they're working with. They're supervised by my folks, but through a 7-hour training program and then the matching, they really know that the level of commitment that they're engaging in. And just this winter, we partnered with the United Way in Passaic County. There wasn't any organization that was running a volunteers and tax assistance program for low-income families. So we decided to see if we could give it a try. And we were able to recruit 21 folks to go through 8 hours of training. And those folks gave 465 hours of volunteer work from mid-July to mid-March. So highly skilled, highly trained, and willing to mobilize on this pretty significant level so that we were able to offer 101 individuals and families free tax return preparation. So that's really what I mean, or that's what I want us to kind of think about when we think about what's possible by using volunteers. Now, I'd love to tell you it's really easy. It's not, because it takes a lot of management on our side, almost as if you were thinking about managing staff members. So let's take a second here, and I would love for you to think about a volunteer experience that you had, either as a young person, maybe you're engaged in volunteer efforts right now. And I wonder if you'd just share a few things about a volunteer experience that you had. What did you do? What was required of you? What skills did you use? Anybody? Yeah.
I feed the homeless, and we also provide the homeless with different necessities. We do that twice a month.
Okay.
So the task is to, prior to going to the site, to arrange the care packages and making sure that we put the boxes together with the sandwiches and everything. So then there's like the pre-work before the actual work.
Excellent. Great. All right. The pre-work before the actual work, right? Yeah, right. Definitely. Other volunteer experiences? Anybody do any volunteer work or community service when they were in high school? Or yeah. Yeah, when I talk to kids a lot of times, they tell me that volunteering is actually kind of boring, right? I stuffed envelopes, I answered phones, I did data entry, and all of that's important. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? Our organizations require a lot of not very sexy work to keep going. But I think sometimes we plug volunteers into those places rather than thinking about richer experiences for volunteers. And the richer experiences are the ones that are going to keep people motivated, right? And people are willing to do some of the grunt work, right, the administrivia, as long as they also have an opportunity to have more of the payoff. So tell me your name? Siobhan. In her example, you know, making sure all the stuff is there and packing the lunches or the boxes is probably not nearly as exciting, although you probably have lots of other people around and music playing. But then that opportunity to make sure that you also have the opportunity to hand that to somebody who really needs it, right? And to get that warm experience that I've made a difference for this person today, we have to make sure that we provide volunteers with both things. Other volunteer experiences or yeah.
I used to volunteer to walk dogs.
For what?
To walk dogs.
To walk dogs, okay. All right, great. So people had to be able to count on you. You had a regular schedule of sorts?
You could go whenever you wanted.
You could go wherever you wanted. Okay. So, and was this at the shelter or something? Okay. So, so she's getting literally the warm fuzzy feeling, right, of taking the dogs out, and the animal shelter probably was set up in such a way that it didn't need a regular schedule, right? They probably had a play yard for the dogs as well. So they could invite people to come in whenever they wanted. That's one kind of volunteerism. There's like the one day also kind of volunteerism. And I want to get us really kind of thinking a little bit about how we might use more regular, more highly trained volunteerism to expand the capacity of our organization. Because I think that it's possible. I think that there are people out there who really want to give and to give of their time. And I think it's upon us to be creative and strategic in the ways that we think about how we can use volunteers to do more for our organizations.
I find that it's easier when they're actually passionate about what they're doing. It's like if they're not passionate about it, then it's pointless in a sense. But once they're passionate about whatever they're doing, they give it their all. And it's hard to find people who are passionate about the work.
Yes. So let's talk about that, because it's, yeah, I think you're right. I think we have to, it's about making meaning, really, right? And so, and I think that people need to know that their efforts, the volunteer work that they're doing, really is going to make a difference, either for the people you serve or for your organization. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to think about using volunteers to expand our reach to clients. And I also want us to think a little bit about how we can use volunteers to expand our organizational capacity, because that's going to be our challenge in the coming years, right? We never have enough money anyway, right? Period. Doesn't matter what kind of organization you're in, we never have enough money. We're never able to hire all the people we need to hire, right? To do all the things that we know need to be done. And so are there ways in which we can use some volunteer work in a, I'm going to call it in a pretty professional or skilled way that helps expand the capacity of our organization at the same time that we're doing our client work? So first of all, yes, we have to ignite passion. We have to make sure people understand what it is that we do and at Family Success Centers, right? And the ways in which we make a difference. So tell me a little bit about how you talk to people about what you do in your organization. Anybody can go. Yeah, please.
I'm a pastor.
Okay.
So one of the things that I depend on volunteers a lot. We are a small church, so it's a lot of work.
Right.
But also we are trying to connect with the community. That's why we connect with the Family Success Center. And I'm learning in the process also. And we are not trying to convince anybody to come to the church.
Right.
We are there because we want to be a community church. And I found finding more and more that a lot of needs in the community, and so I need volunteers to find those needs, and so we run through surveys and answering questions, and most of the volunteers, they are not members of the church, so
Right.
I'm working with them, and it's very pleasant because they're very committed.
Right. Right. So that's a great example. He's using volunteers to be sort of your eyes and ears in the community, right? To go listen and bring the information back to the church so the church can then be helpful. And that's a great role for volunteers, right? They're out and about in the community, they get to talk to people, and then they get to watch the information that they're bringing back become programming, right? Or needs being met in ways that are gratifying, right? And without necessarily becoming members of the church, they can see the church doing its good work in the community, and they feel good about helping the church do that. Excellent example. Other ways that we might be able to use volunteers, or that you're thinking about it, yeah.
I work for Hands In for Youth, we're a non-profit camp, year-round retreat centre in West Milford. Some of our staff members reached out to Just Works recently. Went there to the office, explained what we're about at the camp, what we do for kids in the inner city. And they came up and decided they had an option to go paintballing, or they could volunteer to do some service. So they came to our camp, 35 of them. So to make it fun for them, we had team building activities, a competition between themselves, you know, to get them warmed up, and then we had them empty out our basement, painting the walls. This time of year is important for us to have volunteers because we have summer camp coming up.
Right.
You know, and everything's winterized or closed down in the winter, so
Right.
summertime, you know, we need to get everything ready. As a result of that, we had them people come forward who wanted to sponsor campers who wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to come to camp, and they made a generous donation as well. So, but just on the back of the first thing we said, you know, as far as how do you engage volunteers, and from our experience, you know, that's something really important for us. Great opportunity. But as far as organizing the event, you know, bus getting people, it's raining as well, so we have to bus people back to camp to different locations. Yeah.
Yes. That's another great example. We often organize sort of corporate days of service, right? And it's true that there are a lot of corporations or a department will want to do a team building exercise, and rather than going paintballing or something else, they think, oh, we should do good. And they'll call our office and we'll say, sure, we're happy to arrange that for you. And, you know, and we charge $50 a person to do it. And people are like, I have to pay to volunteer? And it's like, yeah, you have to pay to volunteer, because if you want the coffee and the donuts in the morning and the bagels and the place to be ready, and we share that fee with the organization where they go and volunteer, because somebody has to be there to think up the fun activities for them to do, and to, you know, make sure the paint is there and all the paintbrushes and the gloves. I think sometimes people don't really realize how complicated it is to, again, have a meaningful encounter. Because we can go play at the camp and learn a lot about the camp, but what you did was manufacture an experience that made such a difference for them in thinking about who the kids were going to be, that were going to enjoy the fruits of their labor, that then they wanted to make sure that more kids came, right? And that they were able to get that great feeling even without seeing any kids running around the camp. Speaks to the strength of the programming that you set up. So they got to feel like campers, clearly, right? Remember their own camp experience and think about how important that was. So that's a great example. And it's a lot of work. And I would say for camps, you can do it because the kids aren't there, right? Right? And you know you have this cleanup, and you know you have this work to be done. If we were to think about, are there ways to utilize volunteers or create a volunteer experience when the kids are there during the summer? Because that's another time when you may want to invite some of those folks. They may not all be able to come back. And are there ways in which they can actually then see kids at camp and do something with them? Bring an activity, teach a lesson, do something like that, where they can then, again, feel connected in those kinds of ways. You had your hand up a minute ago.
So back to what you said a minute ago. So for me, it's totally different, because I'm from DC,
Mhm.
and we can't solicit. So when we're out educating the community as to what we are, who we are, what we're doing, what changes we made, we also inform them of different events that we are doing in our county. So for instance, our resource development specialist always put on Regal Festival. So, but to do that, you need support. So ours is educating them on what we're doing and seeing if they'll decide to volunteer to assist us. Luckily, 14 years strong, we've been getting these volunteers to assist us, and mainly because we're out, our faces are out in the community, and they see us, and they don't see us as this horrible agency. They see us as an agency that want to make a difference. And
Mhm.
doing these community events and having our shirts on, letting them know who we are, it really makes a difference, and it makes people want to, just come in. So I know in my role, I get a lot of phone calls that are saying, how can we help? How can we help? And then we just start throwing out the different things that we're doing, and then we try to, encourage them to stay on board.
Right.
To assist us. So
Yep.
that's where it's a little different for our end.
Yep. And yeah, right, because you can't, it's interesting. So you can accept the help, but you can't go and ask for it. Right, okay. I think sometimes too, we have a tendency when someone calls and says they'd like to help out, they'd like to volunteer, and I get it, and it's the right thing to do in most circumstances, but we say, sure, come on in. And then we say, well, what can you do, or what do you want to do, right? And we're making an experience for them that may or may not be what we really need. So I'm going to encourage you to actually keep kind of two lists going all the time. Your organizational needs, this kind of professional volunteerism sort of thing. I really need somebody to help us devise our social media strategy, right? And I know I want this, and I know who on my team is going to work with this person. And now all I have to do is go out and find somebody who wants to do that, is really good at it, needs the experience, because a lot of times people want to build their resume, and to do a project for a nonprofit organization is a great way for them to have a portfolio piece. And so you have kind of a running list of real life projects that your organization needs that's going to move it forward. We need a marketing plan. We need all new materials. We need our work translated into 5 languages. Like, what are the things that you need as an organization that are going to be very difficult for you to do with the resources that you have? And then you go out and you find volunteers, offer it as a volunteer opportunity, skills-based volunteering, to do that work for you. They will need some supervision and some management. Hopefully you can find some people who are pretty independent in those kinds of projects. And then you can also have a running list of the kinds of things that are available for people to do when they just call, or when they find out about your organization and it's been meaningful to them and they want to be helpful in some way. And that may be not as skills-based, but again, you want to make sure that there's something meaningful and passionate that allows that person, even if I'm just stuffing a mailing, to feel connected to the work that the organization does. Those give you an opportunity to find out if anybody who's doing that kind of volunteer work can be converted over to one of these kind of volunteers, right? Or to a donor, or to a board member. So I think it's important to keep kind of 2 sets of projects going on, and not to get confused that anybody calling on the phone is going to be able to help you create your social media strategy. You need to really find that person and recruit that person, almost like you would a staff member. Julie?
Another piece to what you were saying is, because I'm also a government agency, find a collaborator, which, I'm not here as a plant, but I collaborate with Lynne on several different projects. So I have found my community partner to collaborate for volunteers and for solicitation of volunteers. So as a government agency, you can do that, but as a nonprofit, if you have the capacity, like the Volunteer Center has, to be able to supply volunteers, you can also partner with a government agency. So, that collaboration can be very strong based on
Right.
who you have in.
So your reading days, for example, and I don't know, it'd be interesting to find out, kids and moms in our mentoring programs are referred by DCPMP, but I don't know about their community outreach strategies. So I'm going to go back and find out to the extent that they are doing similar kinds of things, because that's a perfect partnership.
And we collaborate with it's a collaboration with the local libraries.
Yep.
With CASA, with other entities that can really make this happen. And actually in Irvington, it is our biggest success center that really helps with the collaboration.
Sure.
more than anything else in Irvington.
Great. And then what you can do is you can drive volunteers, right, because they're reading partners. Is that what the volunteers get to do? Right, which is, and I will tell you, Read Across America Day or something like that, corporations love that, right? So what we do at the Volunteer Center is we do book drives and pack back, what do we call it? Books in a bag. And so we'll prepare backpacks with storybooks for kids to take home and then go to, a low-income school or a program. So not only do they get to pack buy the books, pack the books, hand them out, and read to kids. And we can get corporations to sign up to do that all day, every day, and to pay for the privilege, right? And so in essence, what they do is they sponsor it, which allows me to pay my staff to organize all these things, but then they get this really great experience of going and reading to kids and giving out books if they want to do that. There was a hand, yes?
With your volunteers, do any of them include interns?
Yes, yep. So we run an internship program as well. We have high school interns. Some of our school districts in our area have one of those for seniors. They have a day a week where so again, really pretty professional experience. And what we try to do in our office is to give them some work that is completely their own, right? So that when they come in every week, they know that they're in charge of this project. Again, lots of supervision, of course, but at the end of the day, when the event happens, or we had an intern working on, for our 50th anniversary, we wanted to get sort of commemorative resolutions in all the different towns. And so we had an intern coordinating that and who was going to go and when is it going to be on the agenda. So for her, she was a college student, but this was a pretty huge, we have 70 towns in Bergen County, and I think we managed to get resolutions from 60 of them. But it was a lot of coordination. So she can now say that she's got project management skills, right? Because she coordinated this large scale kind of thing. And so yes, interns definitely. And again, you may find that there are, if you're working with social work students or other people who have practicums as part of their work, they need supervision, obviously, from your professional staff. But that's a way to really expand your capacity. It's great for them because they need the real life experience, and it's great for you because you've got some highly trained people who can do additional work. Please.
You say I am a student at Milford College,
Mm-hmm.
graduating next semester. I started to volunteer in the Palisade Family Success Center last year.
Mm-hmm.
Helping the children with homework and many other things like attending, working participants.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, I was supervised by Vivian and Christian, they work over there. Now I am doing by myself. And I think it's good because it's the way how we can connect with other people, and we get knowledge and how to help our community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I be doing, even though if I get a job, I want to be working always as a volunteer in my free time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to find employees. I've hired several, over the years, we've hired several people who started out as volunteers and kind of worked their way into a job. So it's also potentially a great way with some of your clients to help them gain some skills through volunteer work that then, again, that allows them to gain those, work readiness skills that we often talk about, right? Showing up on time, calling if you have a problem, all that stuff. Computer skills, phone voice, all those different kinds of things. That helps expand our capacity, again, as well, and it also helps them develop those skills. Then I can write a letter of recommendation for someone who's been a regular volunteer in my office, for example, if they're applying for a job.
So as of lately, we have two active volunteers. One is the grandmother and one is a mom. And the way they started off was actually just attending workshops. So they became so intrigued and so basically in love with the work that we do. So they wanted to know basically how could they help. So then from then being participants, they turned into being a part of our community advisory board, parent community advisory board, and now they're active, full-blown volunteers. So what I feel works is sitting with them. We did a vision board together, so I can kind of see what their goals are personally and professionally, so that whatever they're doing, whether it's administrative work, I want it to kind of tie into what they want to do personally and professionally. And they said that the actual supervisions and the meetings that we have actually help them professionally, because now they're working on personal goals. So before it didn't work out, but now that what I'm finding is that people, if you invest in people, they want to invest back into you. So we invested into their children and grandchildren, so now they want to kind of give back. So I think it's being passionate about the work that you do, so that people can kind of see that example and they want to be involved.
So let me give you, and I don't have a watch on, what's my timing like? I'm going to give you a couple of practical tips to be thinking about. And some of this is, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, well, if I had the capacity to do that, right? I wouldn't be sitting in this session. And so I want you to know that I really do understand how difficult this is. I'm going to make it sound easy, and it's not, because everybody is already wearing probably 27 hats in your organization, right? On a good day, and probably 35 hats in your organization on a rough day. So I mentioned the idea of keeping two kinds of lists, right? The sort of, I'm going to call them spontaneous volunteer experiences, one-off days, other kinds of things where you can use lots of volunteer talent or unskilled or untrained volunteer talent just to be helpful, right? And to have a good experience. I'm going to suggest to you that creating that good experience still requires some thoughtfulness. Let's think about the camp, right? And they had some team building stuff first, right? So the staff worked with them first before they went and did their volunteer work, so that they had fun, so that they had a meaningful encounter. I think that every single person or group that steps into our organization to volunteer needs to get our elevator pitch. What is it that we do here? How we make a difference, why it's important, and why you're important to us. So that even if all they're doing is setting out the cookies, right? These cookies are how we get kids and families in the door. And once we have kids and families in the door, right? So that we're really helping connect them to the greater purpose. I'm going to tell you an interesting story that I use in my leadership programs. Because I just love it so much. So there was a widget company out in California, I think, at some point. And it was a factory, right? And factory work can be mind-numbingly boring, right? And people's job was to attach the red wire to the little screw and turn it twice, and then attach the yellow wire to the other little screw and turn it twice, right? And then it goes down the line, and somebody else's job was to do something else. And this company was experiencing a large defect rate on these little widgets, because at the end of the line, it gets tested, and the good ones get packed in a box and sent off to wherever they go, and the bad ones, get thrown over in a bin. And so they were experiencing pretty high failure rate on these widgets coming off the assembly line. And so they tried everything. You know, they tried punishment, right? They tried bonuses, right? Carrots, sticks, they're trying all these things. Finally, in great frustration one day, the CEO or somebody, you know, booms out over the loudspeaker, "These widgets go into pacemakers. We are making the component part of a pacemaker that will keep somebody's heart going," right? So that grandma and grandpa can hug their grandkids, or dad can walk his daughter down the aisle. You are making the component parts of a pacemaker. And snapped off the, you know, off the loudspeaker. Failure rate dropped to 0. Purpose. Absolutely. Spoken from the pastor. Right, purpose, right? So we want everybody who steps foot in our organization for whatever reason, whether they're there for an hour or whether they're going to be there with us for months, to understand the purpose. And if we give them a sense of the purpose, then even the most mundane task can be inspiring, right? So everybody gets our elevator pitch. Everybody understands how they fit into the larger picture of what we do. Then you're going to have that running list of the things that really expand your capacity. And to develop this list, talk to your colleagues, right? This is the wish list. If somebody were to walk in the door with these kinds of talents and skills, what would you want done, right? And maybe somebody will say to you, "Oh, you know, I'd love to have a support group facilitated. You know, we've been wanting to do more of these kinds of things, but we just don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it." Like I said, or social media, or maybe you want a new program designed. And then with that list in mind, you can actually go out, right? You can advertise, almost like a job. You can go out and seek people who may be interested in doing that or have the skill set to do it. We are in Bergen County, through our organization, we're launching something that we're calling Redefining Retirement. And our goal is, with all these baby boomers, right? What is it, 9,000? No, yeah, I think 9,000 people a day turn 65, right? It's the fastest growing demographic around. Not everybody retires at 65, but a lot of them are starting to retire or slow down, but they're still active and they're still mindful. And after they play golf, you know, for a couple months, they get bored. And some of them get bored before they ever play a round of golf or a bridge or whatever is their thing. And so how do we start to harness that talent? Well, this is going to be a group of people. You're going to have professionals. You're going to have all kinds of people with great skills. And maybe they want to continue to utilize their skills in a volunteer capacity. Maybe they want to take that passion that they've always had, right? My uncle was a college administrator, but in his heart of hearts, he was an artist. And so when he retired, he decided that he was going to be a full-time artist. And he began offering painting classes at the firehouse for senior citizens, right? So it gave him space to paint, but it also, and he shared it with others. And I'm sure that it kept him going, probably for 15 or 20 years, right? And so he was indulging in this passion that he hadn't really had time for during his work life. So retirees are going to be a very interesting group of people. They have time, they have flexibility, they have wisdom and experience. Are there ways in which you could find you know, that retired school teacher, that retired social worker, that retired corporate executive to do something for you on your very important wish list or your capacity building wish list? So you're going to generate those two lists. The second tip that I want to give you is you do need to really think about within your organization who will take on the role of managing volunteers. And whether that is in the recruitment storyboarding process, right? So that when we onboard a volunteer, we are really giving them, we're making sure that they have the tools to be successful. and that they're advancing your organizational capacity. So I would recommend that you start a little bit slowly, right? A couple of volunteers at a time, right? So that you can really do that kind of management piece and make sure that it's working out, that they have something meaningful to do, and that it really is adding to your organizational capacity rather than just being one more thing, you know, in somebody's day. And then periodically to kind of step back and you know, evaluate how it's going and plan forward. Some of our work is very cyclical, and so we know we need a lot of volunteers in the springtime to get ready for camp, right? And so that's something that somebody can be working on and planning almost throughout the whole year, and then it's like this big thing, and then off you go. We need more lead time typically than we often give ourselves. And so to try and think, again, pretty strategically about what you need and want. Give yourself plenty of lead time to not only recruit people, create that onboarding sort of supervision kind of role, and then launch it in some way, and then evaluate it and see how well did that work, what could we do better, can we do more? And I think that if you, it is a culture shift to really utilize volunteers. I remember once, before I worked at the Volunteer Center, I facilitated a staff retreat, and they were talking about all kinds of things going on, and I said, well, you know, is there any way that you guys could use volunteers to help you with some of this stuff? And they were like, oh, you know, volunteers are so unreliable. They don't always come when you need them. Now, this was a volunteer center, right? Like, everything we do is with volunteers, and here was the staff, and when they were thinking about their own work, right, they couldn't quite think through how to use volunteers. So it does require a culture shift on the part of your team and your colleagues. And in some respects, I would suggest to you that we're going to get the best work out of volunteers, and we're going to see our organizational capacity increase the most if we almost think about our volunteers like staff members. And in the same way that you would have a job description, right? Have clear guidelines for a new staff member coming on. Can you build a little bit of a program in such a way that you're doing that for your volunteers so that they're really stepping into something that has clarity and support and focus? And if you can do that, I think what you'll really see is that volunteers can definitely enhance your organizational capacity. Let me pause there for a minute and see what kinds of questions you have, and then I have an offer for all of you guys as well. Any questions, any thoughts come to mind? Yes? No. If a corporation wants us to organize a volunteer day like he had at his camp, yeah, we make them pay, yes. But otherwise, no, volunteers don't need to pay.
If they do, you see them committing more than they do?
It's a great question. Yes, right. Yeah, you know, like, how do we get people to show up? I think sometimes, you know what I mean, and I will tell you, I struggled mightily when I first got to the Volunteer Center, because to be perfectly honest with you, I don't like the word volunteer. Right?
Advocate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because I think the word volunteer is a little too loosey-goosey. And I think a lot of people like wake up in the morning and think, hey, I want to do some good in the world today. What can I do? And it's like, what, today? You know, like, and it's true that, sure, is there a food pantry somewhere where you could probably just wake up on a Saturday and say, you know, my kid's been sitting around watching too much TV, we're going to go as a family. And yeah, probably, but that food pantry can't rely on you just waking up and having this idea. They need to know people are coming. So part of what we're trying to do, you know, so after much reflection and angst, I decided I could not change the name of my organization, that would not be wise. It would be, penny wise and pound foolish. But I do think that this word volunteer doesn't really have enough teeth to it in the way that I really want it to. So we're talking about that we're redefining volunteerism and really pushing this notion that what we're looking for is not whimsical volunteering, although that's important and that's good, but that we're really looking for people who want to commit, right? And who really want to make a difference. And so some of it is in how we recruit them and how we advertise. And I would say how we interview people when they call up and say, I have people call my organization on November 10th saying, hey, we'd like to, do some volunteer work on Thanksgiving or December 10th on Christmas Eve. Like well, man, those slots are booked a year in advance, right? Because some people are like, we always do Christmas Eve as a family someplace with people less fortunate than us. And they're like, on December 26th, they're calling up saying, hey, I'm in. Other people like, hey, it just occurred, hey, what a great idea this would be. That's terrific. We need to be putting the message out there that there are needs beyond our own, and that there are ways for people to be helpful so it's more top of mind and people are being more planful. So often when people call on a whim like that, I actually tell them no. because that's just not going to help us or help me, right, in the long run.
But just to that point, the organization that I work for, we actually have volunteers applying. You have to fill out an application to apply so that it's reviewed. You get it off the website, which means hopefully you go to the website and learn about the agency. You apply, you say where your skill set is, you set an appointment to come to the tour. It's not just like, I want to come in 5 hours because I have an hour to go. So you have to invest prior, months, and then that kind of leaves those whimsical people kind of out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we want serious work out of people, then we should demand, yes, that we should actually raise the bar. So we don't need to charge them, but we might need to make them go through like a couple of hoops of flame. And what we have found is that process, like with our mentors, with our volunteers and tax assistants, I was amazed what people were willing to commit to just to have the opportunity to do it. But then once they did, they were like, we added extra tax days and they were like, sure, sign me up. I'm free that Thursday. I mean, people were really, I'm trained, I'm ready to go, use me, right? They had purpose. Yes, ma'am.
To build on that, if you have to do a background check on somebody, then that helps do some screening as well as the application process. But I think part of it is also how we treat our volunteers. Do we say, you're a partner with us in this, or you're an extension of our staff, and let them know how valuable they are and how much you appreciate them. That makes a lot in terms of them then making a commitment of, gee, I want to go there because I know what I'm doing is making a difference, and I know I'm appreciated, and I know that I'm an integral part and I'm needed.
Right. And that their time is really valued. Yes. Playing multiple roles.
Yeah, well, it's very enlightening. I found that to a lot of young people, the term volunteer is demeaning, derogatory, all the above. I was in the entertainment business all my life, so we had titles for everything.
Yeah.
There was vice president of the art departments, assistant to the president. So we made, on our local cable division, we made a term called production team. What is production? Oh, I'm part of a production team. This way it gives meaning and dignifies what you are. You're not somebody going to get coffee or doing that. It opens the door and it gives them recognition because they don't want to be treated as second-class citizens. We allow them to be part. They just can't vote. But it works because it allows us to do different things, and then we mentor these young people, like you said, and teach them what we know, and we, through the volunteers, it allows us to do it.
Yeah, and it expands capacity,
Exactly,
right?
yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
On the resume too,
It does, absolutely, yes. Yeah, and nobody's going to ask you the salary history. It's just like, but I was a member of the production team. Right, absolutely.
And the biggest determining motivation factor of us is that we're volunteers, and we don't get paid, and we put a lot of hours in. So, what we try to do is lessen our workload by getting, the production team or wherever it is to do these little things that, listen, if you can take 3 to 4 hours a week off your workload, now you're down to 40 hours a week.
Yep, yep,
And that's what you try to do. Right?
absolutely.
And media is a very powerful. For the person over there with his local church,
Yep,
maybe they film the church service in the local, and get people involved.
yeah. So again, when you're really thinking about that, that list of strategic volunteer opportunities, right? Things that are really going to advance your program. I have to tell you, so I talked a little bit about retirees. When we talk about millennials, and people are always saying millennials, like with that, like it's a dirty word. And I have a friend who calls the coming generation Generation V for virtual, right? So we are about to have a group of workers coming through our doors who do not remember life before they had a supercomputer in their pocket. They are, they are wired and ready to go. And the only thing they don't like to do is to have to sit somewhere, right? So we need to be thinking about ways to engage them that allow them to be on the go, because they just don't, like, why can't I do it from Starbucks? Well, the truth is they can, if we can think creatively about how that can happen, right? They are also deeply, deeply committed, and they may not have a lot of life experience, but they have information at their fingertips in ways that we can't imagine, and passion. And so, again, to really think about how we can utilize their talents and their skills. And I think things like video and social media and telling our, and helping us tell our story. By doing that, they're learning our story, right? In very powerful ways, and then they're using these tools that are just second nature to them, right? In all sorts of ways. Yeah, Julie.
We have a pretty vigorous internship program at my office. So I look at my interns, kind of as volunteers, but what we do is we give them the opportunity to help our older workers who may not be as comfortable with the technology, and they're teaching those people how to use the technology, but they don't even realize that that's what we're doing. The older workers don't even realize that that's what we're doing. We're bringing in these interns and saying, we need your help with this, 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 and this. And it's really kind of transforming the way that we're doing business in our office.
Yeah, and they just, they think nothing of it, right? I mean, I have a 17-year-old daughter, and somebody sent us a presentation in Prezi. And at the office, we didn't have a Prezi account, so we couldn't download this thing or whatever and make sure that it worked. And so I'm like texting my daughter saying, hey, do you have a Prezi account? And, and so then we logged in as her in order to get this thing. And she didn't just guess what her username and password was. She was sitting there and she tested it out and then texted back and said, so they, because they know, like, we all have too many passwords, right? I don't remember any of them. And she was like, hold on a second, let me just make sure that that's the right password. Go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to ask, I'm just kind of starting out with my position with my org, trying to recruit volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm trying to, with the limitations I know that we have, I'm trying to figure out other recruiting methods of getting volunteers to our center. So do you have any advice in regards to recruiting them?
Yeah.
Like getting them to know that that's open and that they can come over?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Great segue. So my offer to you all is and I don't know how far away you are. I don't know that it matters. At the Volunteer Center of Bergen County, we no longer feel like we are bound by our geography. So we have a cloud-based database that you can list volunteer opportunities in. People who are interested in volunteering can make a profile, what their interests are and other things, and it's searchable. And they can search by zip code, they can search by area of interest, other kinds of things. So I invite any of you, all of you, if you'd like to be a part of our database. It's built on a Facebook platform, so it's pretty easy to use. You can add pictures, blah, blah, blah. And then one thing you can do is you can drive people to our database to go find volunteer opportunities with you. The other thing but beyond that, believe it or not, we still at the Volunteer Center have really good luck with a press release that just lands like in those little community papers and things. People are flipping through them. I don't know why it works. It's certainly going to work with older people interested in volunteering who still flip through the newspaper for a little while longer. Social media is really starting to work. So Facebook, as I understand it, if you want to reach people, I just had somebody kind of give me the lecture, and it made me want to curl up in the fetal position and cry because the whole thing is passing me by. If you want to reach people sort of 40 to 60, Facebook. If you want to reach younger people, millennials, you got to be on Instagram or Twitter. And, you know, Facebook and Twitter talk to each other. I don't know, I'm trying. 2017 is my personal commitment to social media.
Another big one that's taking over for the younger crowd.
Okay. I don't know. Tumblr's like a blog thing, right? Yeah. Faster than that. Right. So Instagram, I would, if I were you, just starting out, I would come up with a bunch of, some eye candy, right? A cool picture and just a couple of words and a link to where they can go for more information, and periodically you just blast out in whatever form you want the eye candy, you know, a picture there, you know, and there's some people in a volunteer t-shirt or people with a paintbrush or people like, you know, working with a kid. You don't have to show the kid's face, just something that's very visual. Come up with a few, evidently in social media, where in newspapers it was headlines. On social media, it's share lines. So you need to think of that, you know, some catchy phrases. You probably only have to have 5 or 6, and you just rotate them around, right? That kind of want to make, you know, like got milk, like want to make a difference, want to, you know, like something that kind of makes people go, what? Yes. And then have whatever they click through, that's where you can be meatier and more, you know, and more extensive. And again, what our database allows us to do is to kind of say like what the role is, and then you can post an application. You can have an application uploaded. You can have a job description. You can put as much information in there as you want. And so again, you can have things that help describe the things that are on that sort of immediate one-time or low-skill kind of volunteer opportunities that might be gateway volunteer opportunities, and then you can have the things for the more serious volunteer who would like to do more. I think social media is going to do it. We also do things like we've built we had some interns do it. I tried to make sure they had other more fun things to do as part of their summer, but we updated our houses of worship list. And we reached for, am I running over? Cut me off. And the other thing that we did, in addition to a phone number and other things, we tried to find a general mailbox, email box that they had, so that if somebody left, it wasn't their name, but it was like info at kind of thing, so that we can do email blasts for volunteer opportunities for them to put in their bulletin or other kinds of things. Helpful?
I just want to say something real quick. As far as our agency, we don't have a personal Facebook page. Our partnership does, so they post everything for us. It has to be approved, so we never go through social media because it takes way too long. But our agency actually uses our local unemployment office, also the Career Center. They have a program called CWEP, and all of their volunteers are the volunteers who are currently like on their TANF programs, their welfare programs, who are required to do volunteer work.
Yep.
So that's how we get most of our volunteers to stay, because it's a requirement. So they do all of our like basic, data entry and stuff like that. But then we also go through the Urban League of Essex County, who does the senior program, and we get a lot of our seniors who come in. They're not called volunteers; they actually work with Victoria, they're teachers' assistants, and they help us with our homework program, but we find that they stay longer, and, you know, when they come through these programs that are either paying them,
Yep.
since we can't, or they're required
Yep.
to do it, they stay longer.
Terrific. Great.